And there we are. Welcome again, once again, to another exciting episode of Conspiracy or Not. Here we come for your listening displeasure. And look who we have tonight. We've got Dr. Charles Koss, one of my favorite people, one of my favorite YouTubers, and certainly one of my favorite subjects to talk about. Charles is crazy, he's zany, he's a little bit loony and a little bit on the genius side. He's not at all afraid to think outside the box. Welcome, Charles. It's been good to catch up with you. How long has it been, mate? Almost a
Thanks so much.
year.
Yeah, it must have been, I think it must have been early 2018, or was it even 2017 when I was here last? I can't remember.
It's
It was,
been it's been a good 8 months or more, easily,
Quite a
easily.
while. Quite a while.
Welcome back, and hello, Amy, and hello, Gandalf.
Hey, Rufus, how's it going?
Going well. It could always be worse. What's up, Gandalf? How you been?
Hello,
Gandalf
Gandalf.
has left the building.
I'm here. Not bad, man.
Cool, cool. Okay, we're all here. Charles, literally, it's been quite a while, and I'm very glad to catch up with you. Again, I'll say again, you are one of my favorite YouTubers, and this is literally one of my favorite topics to speak about. Ancient cultures, ancient structures, ancient artifacts, just fascinating stuff to no end. How have you been, man? You've been busy lately.
well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I've been getting my channel back on the road, making lots of videos, and because I can't keep up, like people are sending me pictures, images, and I have to make videos about them. And I say, yeah, I want to make a video about this. I want to make a video about that. I want to make a video about that. And they say, yeah, sure, you can use those photos. So, I just have to do it the way I'm doing it, filming the screen, talking over it, because there's so much information to get out there. Yeah. I feel obliged to get it out there.
So I don't remember exactly, but first time we talked, you were in the what was it, the 12 or 15,000 subscriber range? Now you're up to like 45,000. You're doing very well for yourself.
45. It's been stuck on, it's been stuck on 45 since about March. And I discovered that in March, YouTube caved into Hollywood, and they've been pushing TV shows ahead of independent creators. So it's now harder to get new viewers than it was before. So now all the independent creators, they're more stuck with their, not stuck, but they just have the same subscribers coming back all the time, and it's hard to see new viewers. And I've noticed that as well. All the trolls have vanished. There's only a few trolls now because it's hard to get new people. People who don't know me are usually trolls. They say, hey, this guy's crazy, this guy's nuts, what's he talking about, But yeah, YouTube's done that. Hopefully they change back. Hopefully they come to their senses, and realize they're all about what they used to be, which is broadcast yourself, and not broadcast what's already on cable. Who needs a second cable TV on YouTube? We've got enough of that.
I agree.
I'm about to turn my cable off.
Yeah.
I've been battling. The only reason I have cable right now is because of my wife, because I literally don't watch television at all anymore, and it's literally the only reason I have cable, and it's disgustingly expensive. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. And the packages that they give you always come with a shitload of channels that you're not even interested in, that you never watch, and they make you buy these packages that encompass the channels that you are interested in, and it's just bizarre, the pay structure. And I noticed recently that the movie channels that I am subscribed to, like HBO, Showtime, Stars, HBO in particular, um, gosh, they're putting out video or movies that are 30, 40 years old. I mean, it's bizarre. I can't believe you turn on HBO and they've got seven channels, literally seven HBO channels, and you can't hardly find anything that's new anymore on HBO. It's all this old crap, 20 and 30 and 40-year-old movies. It's
Wow.
it's disgusting, and they're no, I've had enough of cable.
That's the way TV used to be, actually. Back a long time ago, apparently, they only showed like 1930s and 40s films during the 60s and 70s, allegedly, because the movie industry said, hey, you can't show new films. This will crush the movie industry. and they forced the governments to legislate that TV can only show movies more than 20 or 30 years old or something. Looks like maybe that's started again or something like that.
It's bizarre, and I think everybody is pretty well tired of that. I think cable is going the way of the home phone line. Since everybody now has cell service, everybody's got a cell phone. Almost nobody has a home phone line anymore. So I think cable, with the internet the way it is, the high speed streaming and all that, Netflix, I think cable is it's a dying breed.
Probably. I give high probability to that.
Well, now they're going to replace cable with these competing streaming services. So now it's going to be like Amazon versus Netflix, Netflix versus that Hulu thing, and now Disney's coming out with one. So it's going to get to the point where it's going to be back to how cable was, where you're going to need multiple subscriptions to these online websites. So
Eh.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure we're all already aware of YouTube's recent change of policy and their terms of service and their policies, where they're now going to promote what they call, quote, authoritative sources. And those authoritative sources are Fox and CNN, which are known liars, man.
Yes.
And
Oh,
these are the
God.
authoritative sources, but no, alternative ideas like you, Charles, alternative ideas, people with channels. And I mean, look, you got 45,000 subscribers. People are obviously interested in what you're doing over there. And yet you're being pushed to the back of the line, in lieu of what's, in quotations, authoritative sources, and which is, by the way, literally known liars. So, I mean, and not to mention that, if I'm not mistaken, who was it that gave 25, gosh, I'm having a hard time remember the details now. Was it $25 million to Fox and CNN YouTube channels to get their YouTube channels up and going and running, and pardon me for forgetting all these details, but somebody gave, it might have been YouTube, um, a huge amount of money. I think it was $25 million to help promote these, quote, authoritative channels. So, I mean, the jig is up. The game is rigged. There's no question.
Oh, exactly. Exactly. I'm just reading that YouTube is paying celebrities now to have their own YouTube channel. So they give them a lump sum of like 20 grand or something, or much more even, to start their own channel and to start uploading content, you know? So so that's why we're saying like the celebrities have their channels now on YouTube. And yeah, I have to tell you, if I started my channel today, it wouldn't grow. It wouldn't grow at all, based on what I'm seeing. You know, based on the type of viewers and all this, and where the viewers are going these days, based on where YouTube is pushing them. And I've got a colleague, Ancient. What's he called? He's called
Ancient Architects?
no, another guy, History Maze. History Maze has put out 45 videos or more, and he's only got 200 subscribers, and his channel just doesn't grow. I've even pushed his channel on my channel, but it just doesn't grow, because it's not like it was in the old days. And I told him, look, if this was the old days of YouTube, just maybe 2 years ago even, you'd have 2,000 subscribers already, because
Right.
your content is really good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy that you promoted our show tonight, because it looks like I picked up maybe 8 to 10 subscribers from your little batch.
Oh, nice.
So literally just in the last 24 hours, I picked up a good 8 to 10 subscribers just from having you on, and the fact that you included our little promotion video, 1 minute video at the end of your last, not your last, but the second to your last video. You threw that in there, which was really great, and gave me a little bit of a boost there. I got at least 8 or 10 in the last 24 hours, so thanks for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. Yeah.
So what have you been up to lately? Are you working on a new book? How's your book doing, by the way?
I am. So altogether, I've calculated I've sold 1,000 copies of of different books, but mainly the Pyramids book and that Confessions of the God book, which was the big seller. So, Eric von Daniken, he really had it right. And also, what's his name? Graham Hancock, he really had it right to put a "of the gods" at the end of the title, because
Right.
that's the style
That's
of books.
marketing,
And
man, marketing.
it's marketing. So I'm working on a new one now called Civilization of the Gods, 100,000 BC. So I'll be talking about lots of theories I used to push on the channel early on, and I'll be including those because people used to say I should do a chronological order of the theories, and that's too hard, but I can do it in written form.
Oh, come on. We're talking to PhD Dr. Charles Koss. Don't talk to me about too hard.
Yeah, hey, yeah, that's the way. Well, exactly. So, but yeah, I'm going to put that into like a sort of written form, and just chronologically. So, the start of the last advanced civilization, which I think was maybe 120,000 BC, because that's when it got warm. Warmth is associated with civilization. It's warm now, and we're at the top of civilization. So, last time it happened is a great mechanism for a past civilization.
Well, Charles, you remember last year you interviewed me on the subject of astrotheology, and unfortunately the audio was so corrupted that it just wasn't worth uploading. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure if you've ever, before or since, if you've spent any time looking into the Thunderbolts project on YouTube, or the Electric Universe model thesis, or the Sapphire project, where they're doing plasma physics in laboratory experiments. They're a subset. They're not really affiliated, but well, they're associated, but they're not affiliated. Um, the Sapphire project, that is. So I'm not sure. Have you spent any time looking into any of that stuff? Like the work of David Talbot, or have you picked up any Manuel Velikovsky literature?
Not as much as I would want. The problem with YouTube is I have a lot of music in my blood, and I just end up listening to music clips. I can't help it. I'm just listening to music clips all day. So I actually don't watch a lot of those channels. I don't watch, and lots of viewers, they say, "Hey, have you checked out this video? Have you seen this? Have you seen this?" And I say, unfortunately, I haven't. I haven't watched those.
Well, I've got a presentation to give to you tonight, and
Oh yeah.
it's based on the work that you've been doing, and it's my interpretation of some of the stuff that you've been covering, and it's completely related to the astrotheology concept. And I will urge you again to literally take a serious look at this particular subject and apply it to to the way that you approach your investigations and your evaluations of ancient cultures, structures, and artifacts. And I think maybe after I give you this little presentation tonight, and I'm going to cover some of the things that you cover, and I'll show you how I interpret it through the lens of astrotheology, which also is completely and directly related to this electric universe model. And if you can get that stuff into your head, I think it will change the direction of where you're going, and I think it might refine your analysis of some of the stuff that you're looking at. So
Hey,
I would very strongly urge you to go and get yourself a copy of Immanuel Velikovsky's book. It's called Worlds in Collision, which is
oh yeah.
his most popular book. I've got two or three. I've got Earth in Upheaval. I've got a couple of other books from Immanuel that I still have to read. And I was just reading. I took the RV out this past weekend, and I had a couple of days of downtime, and I was reading the Worlds in Collision, and I was just my brain melted out of my skull when I was reading these passages. Like, for instance, in the Bible, it describes it describes a moment where they say the sun and the moon stood still in the sky, quote, for about a whole day. And yeah, I can tell by the look on your face. That's the reaction people get when you hear something like that. It's like, okay, right, the sun stood still. That's not possible. How is that possible? So when you read Immanuel Velikovsky, and you consider the possibility of his thesis that Mars and Venus and Saturn were aligned and very, 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 very close to Earth, where humans could witness this alignment, and that there were plasma filaments coming off of Venus, and that Mars would oscillate back and forth between Earth and this alignment. And when Mars got close to Earth, the gravity would suck dust and atmosphere and rocks and gravel from Mars to Earth. And then you apply that to the concept of fire and brimstone. You apply that to many of the concepts that are stated in biblical literature and ancient literature. You start to see that there's a real correlation here. And the work of Velikovsky is extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary, where he describes in multiple cultures, not just the Bible, multiple cultures described rivers of blood, that there was a blood red stain on everything on the entire earth, and that sort of makes sense when you think. And I'll show you some images here coming up soon. It just makes a whole lot more sense.
Awesome. Yeah, it's true. I read that book as well. I think I've read all his books, but yeah, Worlds in Collision, my brain melted too, and I could see why at the time it was such a suppressed book, because he talks in an authoritative manner as if this is a real science book, and as if he's trying to shift the paradigm of knowledge. And yeah, it made a lot of people upset. And I think there's definitely, his stuff really needs to be really heavily investigated once again. People are doing, especially Thunderbolts, yeah.
I agree, and it is being re-examined. Thunderbolts Project, David Talbot, and the work of those people are doing a great job. This idea where, like in the Bible, where it describes the sun and the moon standing still in the sky, as bizarre as that sounds, Velikovsky, he thought to himself, if something happened that would cause the Earth to slow down or stop or pause its rotation temporarily, that would be the only way that the sun and moon would stop and stand still in the sky. And if that actually happened, if it's possible that that would happen, then we should be able to go to the other side of the Earth and look at the ancient writings of cultures on the other side. And that's exactly what he did. And he found the Mayan cultures and Mexican cultures on the other side of the Earth, on the Western Hemisphere. Because remember, the Bible story is from the Eastern Hemisphere of Mesopotamia and Samaria and Judea, Canaan, these lands. So on the opposite side of the Earth, there are actually tales where it was nighttime for like a day and a half or 36 hours or more than a night or an extended night. All these tales of an extended nighttime. And it really raises the hair on my arm. I just got done reading these last couple of chapters on this particular subject, and I'm not joking, my brain just about fell out of my ears.
Well, absolutely. So, and when you said that earlier, and I gave that expression, I was trying to think, how is that possible? Because I know it's possible, because I respect the ancient peoples and what they handed down. They didn't hand down something that was rubbish, The stuff was handed down and taught by priests who ran schools, and they knew that something was happening and something magical had happened, and they wanted that to be remembered forever. They didn't have a photograph. They might have drawn a picture in a book, but yeah, they had to pass something like that down. And maybe, do you think it could have been a sundog or something? Or because the axial to stop the rotation, it's so severe. But if we're talking electric universe, electrons bouncing around between orbits and stuff, if there's an electrical mechanism, we use electricity to do that kind of thing, to stop something instantaneously, to start it again. We use magnetism to do that, don't we? Even the launch thing on the aircraft carriers, that's an electrical device. It's not a. It's not a. It's not. Remember that there was a controversy a few weeks ago. It's not a steam-powered device, which would be cheaper. They're using some kind of electrical device to suddenly launch craft off aircraft carriers. Yeah.
Oh, well, I hadn't heard of that. I've always known that it was a mechanical device, that they had a cable, and it was steam powered as far as I knew, that they would launch aircraft with a cable and a steam powered ram, uh, uh, like almost like a hydraulic ram that would pull this cable really hard and launch. Um, they also would raise up platform behind the aircraft that would give the jets something to push off against. So everything that they could to get the aircraft up to speed as quick as possible. But I had not heard that they're doing electromagnetic propulsion off of like aircraft carriers. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it uses the cable or not, but it is electrical. And Trump was saying they should go back to the steam engine for that because it's cheaper, and the one they're using now has big problems. So in a war, like I guess Russia could fry it with a
Mm.
blast or something, and
An EMP would shut everything down, right?
yeah.
Um, I want to mention we've had a couple of questions from Laz in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not even paying any attention. Let me go open up the chat and
He
pop
he
it out.
he asked, he says Graham Hancock had a
Sorry,
new
I'm not even
book
paying
saying
any attention.
civilization started in South America, not Europe, and not Sumeria, and wants to know what you think about that. And he also wants to know if you were serious or joking in your man bag video.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So, what about Graham's assertion that civilization started in South America? What do you think about that, Charles?
Um, I think it started in Asia, I have to say. And the reason I say that is where the IQ was. And if the IQ has been decreasing down the generations, we have to look at, I think, where it all started. And if we're talking lost ancient technology with a small population, these people had to have a very high IQ. So I would look to Asia because these people are obviously very good at school, they're very clever, and they just delight in this kind of thing in how intelligent they are. Robert Schoch, in a book on pyramids, actually pointed out that he believes that the pyramid culture started in Thailand. And he says this because that's where the copper use seems to have originated. They seem to have entered the Metal Age first in Thailand. And I actually didn't know that. It's not a well-known fact. And we can actually link some of those 10,000-year-old structures in Indonesia. And I believe there's a 10,000-year-old pyramid there as well, but it's sort of covered in dirt, and it has a stone circle or something on top. But they say it's 10,000 years old. And yes, that could be I think where it's from. In addition, Indonesia is a sunken land, similar to Atlantis. It's an archipelago. It would have been more like a continent when the sea levels were lower. And he said that the sinking of this area caused the pyramid culture to spread around the world. Now, I think that's a pretty good argument. I don't like the idea of civilization starting in America because America has issues. America has problems with a civilization lasting more than, say, a few hundred years. America, when Europeans arrived, it was tribal warfare. It was heavily populated, and the English actually apparently had trouble founding colonies there because it was already heavily populated with the natives, but then they started dying off. And I'm thinking it could not have been from disease. They say it was from disease. There must have been some other catastrophe. And I say that because the Irish were already there. The Irish had already visited America. And I can prove that. I can absolutely prove that. Even with stuff I haven't released yet, I can even talk about that today. But if the Europeans were already there, how did a disease that they had not been exposed to wipe them out? So I have problems with America being the land of the first civilization, because you also have extreme weather in America, and that's another problem. In America, you have to pay for the damage of hurricanes that other countries, look at bucolic Europe, they never get to experience these hurricanes and typhoons and tornadoes. And America manages to be richer than them. But America, these typhoons, they wipe out America, whatever civilization was there periodically. And that's why the old world is where it is and the new world is where it is. Because civilization just couldn't really arise there and maintain its momentum long enough before it was destroyed. What do you think?
That's it. That's no. Go ahead.
The man bags. The second part of the question, the man bags video. I was quite serious. Maybe I was a bit tired or something, but I was actually a bit frustrated in that video. So this is the video where I actually said the bags that you see in the Babylonian and also in some Olmecs are being Chinese people from Asia mixing with the natives. So it's a Eurasian thing that they would carry a bag, and they'd also have a pine cone. And I said in that video, look at what the Catholic priest has. He has something which is similar to a pine cone, and he dips it in the bucket and sprinkles the water. And a pine cone is actually perfect for holding water, lots of water. You can sprinkle it many times because the water will be released gradually.
Area. Because of the surface area.
Yeah, it's got huge surface area. It's perfect for sprinkling water. And I said, look, there's a pine cone. Someone online said, oh, this is the ancients were collecting pollen and stuff. And no, he's growing the tree of life when he's sprinkling that water on that tree. So I was serious, but I was also frustrated because I just sat down and I was frustrated because I thought, hang on, this is so obvious. Why hasn't someone seen this yet? You know, so that's why I was being a bit the way I was.
Well, I thought it made an awful lot of sense. And yeah, Laz said that he thought it had something to do with collecting pollen, but pine cones I can't see as being the most optimal for collecting pollen, but I can easily see them being used as devices to pick up water and sprinkle it. Definitely.
Yeah. It's also a symbol of fertility. It's seeds. It's new life.
You know, I'm looking for it somewhere around here. I've got a picture of the Olmec with the handbag. I'll find it here in a minute, but you guys just, you know, that handbag is all around the world. The Olmecs are in South America, Mexico, South Mexico. Those handbags are seen on, there's a pillar in Göbekli Tepe that shows those handbags. Sumeria, Babylonia, those handbags are prominent. And it's exactly the same handbag.
Oh, it certainly is.
Yeah.
The size, the shape, everything about it is exactly the same. Here it is. Here's the, oops, where did it go? This one right here. This is an Olmec handbag. It's exactly the same. Charles,
we can see it on the video, but not in the Hangout.
oh. I can share my screens in the Hangout so you guys can see as well.
That would help. It's easier to make commentary.
I gotta move some stuff around here. Give me just a second. And share. That ought to do.
That works. Thank you.
So yeah, there's an ancient Olmec carving of this character, and he's sitting inside of what's obviously a snake, which is, it's got the rattlesnake tail. So he's sitting inside of a rattlesnake. Obviously, it's a serpent. the head of the serpent has got features that snakes don't have. He's got like these feathers, so we could
Yeah, I
almost
was going to say it looks like a bird beak, like an eagle beak.
see this like as a dragon, and I will cover this shortly because I have a presentation I want to give to Charles that has to do with the dragon, the feathered serpent. But this is an Olmec stone carving, and that handbag is exactly the same handbag that. Here's one from Göbekli Tepe. I think this is pillar number 43. Excuse me, pillar number 43. And it's got 3 handbags on the top. Now,
Yeah.
what's interesting to note here is that the other animal symbols on this particular pillar are astrological in nature. The bird, or the eagle, or the vulture, in this case. Down below, we have the scorpion. So those are astrological symbols in their nature. Charles, I think this is an image that I screen grabbed from one of your videos. Sure is. I think you visited a museum last time we spoke. This is your video, The Forgotten Crown Jewels of Atlantean Nobility. And here is somebody made a 3-dimensional handbag. The only issue I have, Charles, with your assessment of the handbag as a ceremonial water, like a, pitcher or something, the only issue I have with that is that these handbags are wide at their base and they taper as they go up. And literally every case of these handbags, literally every single image. Oops, I opened up the wrong. There we go. They don't have the shape of the ceremonial vase that you showed in your video. I think your assessment is probably a good one,
Yeah.
but but clearly these people had technology where they could carve these stones with a good degree of accuracy. And in every case or all the way around the world, the handbag has a wide base.
Indeed, that's a pretty good criticism of the idea that they might be buckets, because uh, a bucket usually does not have a wide base. In terms of these images, I didn't notice that reliquary, that little relic box, ancient Ireland, is a handbag. You noticed that. It's very interesting. Possibly it's a relic box. It's carrying they're carrying the relics of the ancestors, but that is what that is used for. It is used for, say, putting the dust or the bones of St. Patrick or something like that. In terms of Göbekli Tepe, I don't think those are handbags. I think those are the roof of a building. And the reason I say that is there are Vinca carvings which are similar, and they also happen to show a temple roof or something. The astrological imagery, I'll be putting out a video in the next few days. That bird with the ball is the phoenix, because there is a legend where the phoenix is associated with the sun. So the ball is the sun, but it's also it wraps up the phoenix wraps up its ancestor in wax and then travels to the temple of Heliopolis, wherever that is. Now, Baalbek and Giza were both called Heliopolis back in the day. And I believe that bird is carrying its ancestor in that ball of wax because that matches the phoenix myth. And the phoenix lives 500 years. It erupts into fire, but then it's reborn like the sun. So it's a symbol of fertility. And that would make Göbekli Tepe a fertility temple. And I believe that those handbags are the roof of the temple of Heliopolis, because that's part of that phoenix myth. So that must be the phoenix. As for scorpion, I'm not sure. There's not a lot of scorpion mythology, I got to be honest. Maybe it's.
Well, we do have a constellation known as Scorpio.
We do.
Now, There is in the Middle East, there's a scorpion that has a double stinger. Not one, but literally two. On the tip of his tail, there are two stingers.
Yep.
And this was confirmed by a friend of mine who was born in Jordan. And she confirmed to me that they do have over there a scorpion that has a double stinger. Now, 2 weeks ago, we interviewed Jordan Maxwell. Jordan Maxwell has spoken about the the double stinger and what's known as the kiss of death, which represents Judas Iscariot in the biblical myth, because Judas kisses Jesus in order to identify him to the Romans. Now, first of all, that story it's false on its face, because someone as charismatic and well known as Jesus would not need to be identified. They would have already known who he was. He had an entourage, he had a following, people came out to see him, he was healing people. They would have known who he was. He would not need to have been identified by Judas. So that's just a part of the story. What's interesting about Judas is Judas kisses Jesus in order to identify him. It's a kiss. And that is ultimately his death sentence, because then he's arrested and then crucified. Now, in the Middle East, there's a scorpion that when it stings you, it leaves a wound on your skin that looks like a pair of lips. Like a woman puts on fresh lipstick and kisses a mirror and leaves the lip shape imprint. So there's this scorpion that when it stings you, the wound on your skin looks just like a pair of lips, and it's known as the kiss of death. Now, Scorpio, if I'm not mistaken, represents the month of October, which is the end of the year when the sun is low in the sky and winter is approaching. So it represents the death of the sun. It's the kiss of death. And Jesus is one of many, many solar deities. So it sort of fits right in line with the astrotheology aspect where, okay, Scorpio, the constellation Scorpio is high in the sky, the sun is dying, so there it is, Scorpio, the kiss of death, the sun is dying, and there becomes the anthropomorphized myth.
That's a good interpretation. Yeah, it could be that. The kiss thing as well. This is what snakes do. Apparently, this is what people observed snakes to do. So it ties into the old snake religion as well. So and Jesus in Ireland was associated with the snake. The snake shedding its skin is Jesus regenerating into a new person, kind of like Gandalf regenerating after fighting the Balrog. Which is also based on Norse mythology, right? You turn into something else. So that kiss thing, that is definitely some kind of fertility resurrection religion as well.
You know, you probably don't remember when you interviewed me on astrotheology, I covered the Judas Iscariot story, the narrative. If you go and look at old commissioned paintings from, say, the Renaissance of Judas, just do a Google search for Judas Iscariot image. Just do an image search on Google for Judas Iscariot. Judas is always depicted with yellow and red and orange clothing. And and colors are symbolic. So those are the colors of fall. The leaves turn orange, red, yellow. That's the end of the year. Those are the ember months: September, October, November, December. Those are the ember months. And Judas, go look. Just do a quick Google search. Just look at Judas Iscariot. I should be screen sharing. I'll do it right now. Judas Iscariot is always shown in orange. Almost always. Orange, yellows, and reds. Here, let's just do this real quick. Just for fun. Judas Iscariot.
I think it's an I, not an E.
Google will correct me. Image. I don't need the death. I just want Judas Iscariot image. So here's Judas kissing Jesus. Just notice all the reds, and look at this one, yellow, reds and orange, orange, reds, yellows, red. There he is with his bag of money. Orange, yellow, here he is kissing Christ. Orange, orange, yellow, red. These colors are ubiquitous for Judas Iscariot.
Well,
Here's
that makes, I guess, a Roman or a Phoenician. I guess if I don't know what the Phoenicians wore, but they traded this red color, and the Romans and probably the Etruscans before them would have dressed in this as a sign of rank. And it's also obviously a sign of it became a sign of royalty in the Middle Ages as well. So many of these paintings are through that lens of, therefore, of Judas as maybe a kind of royal. But what's your spin on it?
Well, my spin is that Judas represents the constellation of Scorpio because it's the kiss of death. And because it's in the Ember month, that he's represented with yellows, reds, and orange. Like almost always, almost all images of Judas are embodied those colors. So to me, that to me screams that it just fits. It's right in line. It makes almost perfect sense that the Ember month, the end of the year, the death of the sun, and remember Jesus is a solar deity. So, okay, the kiss of death, and that's Scorpio, and I'm pretty sure that's the month of October. So
It's a good information.
so that means that the sun is dying. We're entering. And I know that some people are going to say, "Oh, you got that from Zeitgeist, blah blah blah." No, well, I mean Zeitgeist did cover it, but this is actually much older material. But it's astrotheological in nature, and I'm so heavily into this particular subject, and I look at everything through the lens of astrotheology. And when I consider ancient cultures who didn't have cell phones, television, cable, and all of the media that we have, what did they have? And I'll phrase it how one of my best friends, we talked about this, and he said it was their HBO. Looking at the sky, tracking the stars, watching the wandering stars, we call them planets, um, comets, meteors, asteroids, the sun, the moon, the constellations. This was their HBO. This was their main form of entertainment. It makes perfect sense that things that happened in the sky were venerated to the ancient people
Yes,
in
yes, I agree.
on such a magnitude as to cause them to create religions, to build structures, the whole works, literally the whole works. So every culture, I mean, almost every single culture around the world, no matter what time period or where you look on Earth, they all had gods that represented the planets. They all had gods that represented the sun, the moon, in some cases, nebulas, in some cases, comets, in some cases, um, you know, lightning and thunder, volcanoes, and things like that. So they anthropomorphized everything that they didn't understand. And
Charles, I'd like to ask if there is an Atlantis. I was wondering where you would think it would be.
Well, I think it would be in The problem is because the sea level rose so much over the last 10,000 years, it would be everywhere. But because hence the flood stories everywhere. But the problem is, it's got to be. There's a specific set of instructions. It's in the Atlantic. It's on some kind of trade route to America because they followed a string of islands to get to the opposite continent, which is I'm guessing America, and lots of people have said America. We know that there is copper from Lake Superior found in the Middle East. So there was some Atlantic trade. So there were islands behind Atlantis to get to the opposite continent. So I'm guessing UK mainly, and the UK area, the Doggerland that has sunk, is Atlantis. And I made a video a few days ago. I put out a video saying I think Old Sarum is Atlantis. Old Sarum is bordered by a string of monuments, which would have been fortresses 6 miles away, with Old Sarum at the center. And Old Sarum looks like Atlantis. It's canals cut around a hill. Atlantis was canals cut around a hill. Atlantis had a wall 6 miles away. Old Sarum has this kind of structure 6 miles off surrounding it, which actually includes Stonehenge. So Stonehenge might be recycled from some fortification of that wall. So I think also we have immediately in the vicinity, inside this wall is the city of Amesbury, which is, you look it up on Wikipedia, it says that they've radiocarbon dated it. It's the oldest town in England. It's 8,000 BC. So I think that's definitely somewhere, it's somewhere in the Atlantic, it's in the UK area, but Atlantis was also, in addition to being a city and an island and a place, it was a confederation of 10 kings. And maybe they just met on this island that they're describing. So it could be the whole Atlantic coast. It could be parts of America could be included in this empire as well. So it literally it was a huge empire. So how can it be in one place? This is so tricky, isn't it? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in Daggerland and how there was this giant area. I think the area is roughly equivalent to like 3 times the size of the United Kingdom that sunk under the sea in that area. But then again, like it happened all over the world, like the sea levels rose everywhere. So what would happen today if every single coastal city were to go underneath the water? It would be chaos, and that's really why I think everything's lost from that period of time. Is there were huge population movements, there were wars that took place from the people that were now looking for a new place to go and live, kind of like the sea peoples, right, in the late Bronze Age, right? But yeah, see, I don't know. I always thought maybe if Atlantis did exist, it would maybe be in the Canary Islands.
Yeah, and that's a good place as well. That's a very old theory of Atlantis, and that's it's a pretty good theory. Didn't Charles Berlitz have this theory as well? And he presented a lot of evidence. He in his books he presents such a compelling case for whatever he talks about. But didn't he associate this with the? No, but you mentioned Canaries, not Azores. I think he was more on the Azores, Mid-Atlantic Ridge area. But Canary Islands, you know what? That's a good place for Atlantis because you have to sail past the Canary Islands southwards to catch the trade winds to get to America. So that's quite interesting that you say Canary Islands, because if we're talking about a great empire and they were rich in metal, they could have used American metal like the Spanish did, or metal around the UK. UK rich in metal too, around Wales. Hey, yeah, who knows? Well, what reasons do you have for saying Canary Islands?
Well, just from looking into what Plato said, that it wasn't far beyond the Pillars of Hercules, I wouldn't think that it would be way far off into the Atlantic. I think like a nice place would be right there, just outside of the Pillars of Hercules. And, if you think about it, those islands, although they are pretty small today, like you could look at how 10,000 years ago, there would have been just enough land for that area there to actually support some kind of city and civilization.
think Thor Heyerdahl would have agreed with you, because he was really into the Canary Islands and the transatlantic contact between, which he thought would have involved the Canary Islands, because he did a lot of work on publicizing those pyramids in the Canary Islands, which supposedly carbon date to the 19th century. An entrepreneur there has opened them up as a sort of park that you can visit, but I cannot believe they date to the 19th century, because, and I think I showed that they actually point to the solstices. So they're not 19th century, but they were tampered with in the 19th century, and they were messed with, and maybe they were maybe some landowner. What could have happened? Here's a scenario: some landowner scooped them up, just started quarrying them, and then the people said, "No, you cannot destroy the graves of our ancestors, or bad things will happen. The land will sink. The sun will stay still in the sky. You have to put it back." So then they put it back, and then it radiocarbon dates to the time it was put back, possibly, you know. But yeah, there are pyramids there which look like almost like American pyramids or Pacific pyramids. So it's yeah.
Yeah, well, it's crazy that they're able to cover this up the way that they are. When it comes to, the official story on how North and South America were founded and first discovered by the Europeans, it always goes to Christopher Columbus. But, everyone knows that the Vikings were here. Like, the Vikings were here. They have maps. And in the Great Lakes region, there's actually different artifacts that have been found all over the place. In Wisconsin, they found Viking metal. In southern Ontario, in Peterborough, which is just not too far inland from the Lake Ontario, they actually found a Viking sword. So the Vikings were traveling all throughout the Great Lakes. Like, there's no doubt about it. They had to have been. And it wasn't just that Lansom Meadows little settlement in the northern tip of Newfoundland. There was definitely some type of exploration that went all over. And so that happened with Vikings and longboats. Who knows what could have happened like thousands of years ago. And I don't think it would be too difficult for some earlier civilization. Like, there's now reports that even cavemen could have possibly been able to be seafaring, at least with dugout canoes and rafts. And the oldest human remains in all of the Americas are dated to 50,000 years ago, that were found in northwestern Brazil, or northeastern Brazil, sorry.
It's I'm almost 50 years old. I haven't been in school in a long time, certainly not grade school, but I just wonder if the textbooks have been changed to upgrade the new information that everybody seems to know, and that is that Columbus was not the first person to discover America. This whole notion that he's held on this pillar, this great guy Columbus, who who
Yes.
wasn't such a great guy. Apparently, he slaughtered and enslaved indigenous people. So, and it's completely well known at this point. Like you
Yes.
said, Charles, that there's copper from the Great Lakes area of Michigan that was found in Europe. So we knew that they were coming here. That not only did, I mean, look, let's be honest. If you're on foot, if you're a Viking, and you sail across the ocean, you make it to America, and you wander around on foot, how long does it take? Weeks, months, perhaps years before you discover, oh, look, there's a deposit of copper. Let's start mining the stuff and taking it back. How long does that take? This is not something that just happened overnight.
No.
It's well known that the Egyptians were here in America, that the Chinese were here in America, that the Vikings were here in America. It's well known.
Well, there are stories of the Phoenicians being able to circumnavigate Africa. And what was that, 2,500 years ago or 2,400 years ago? It was a story of circumnavigation of the continent of Africa. The Phoenicians wanted to know what was on the other side of that continent. And then there was also Carthaginian exploration, because Carthage was in the northern tip of Africa, so they wanted to know what continent they were on. So if Carthaginians were capable of doing that thousands of years ago, I really don't think that they're that much more sophisticated than the Vikings were. And there's been discoveries of gold dinars that have Roman insignia on them that have been discovered along the Atlantic coast of the U.S. I think it was in North or South Carolina. They actually found dinars from a Roman ship, so that maybe ran aground somewhere. So I just don't. I want to know what you think, Charles. Why is it there this huge issue with people accepting that Christopher Columbus wasn't the first person to sail across the Atlantic? Why? How are they able to still be able to push this idea that their official story is the right one when there's all this evidence to the contrary to it?
I think the main reason is because that is when printed history begins. So I did a PhD in medieval history, and one thing I noticed was that a book printed before AD 1500, they're so rare that they have a special term. They're called an incubala, and these books are. I actually didn't find any from before about 1492, which happens to be the year that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Right.
So Christopher Columbus may have been the first American discoverer to enter printed history. And a printed book is like the internet compared to a written book, a handwritten book, because a handwritten book is read by two people. And it's handed down the generations, and then it's read by two more people in the next generation, or it might be loaned out. But you don't want to loan it out because they're not going to give it back. But a printed book is almost disposable. And around 1492, in London and in the Netherlands, maybe actually a bit earlier in the Netherlands and a little bit earlier in Milan, bookshops started to appear selling these printed books. And there would have been a very early book championing Columbus, and that is, I think, why the Columbus myth is so enduring. The legend was built up by these early authors who wrote about Columbus, which include his family members, by the way. They were authors writing about their great ancestor and writing their brother or cousin or whatever. And they made the bookshops, and then it did the rounds. Everyone knew about it because it was sold in bookshops. You don't sell a handwritten book in a bookshop. There were no bookshops in the Middle Ages. It only started around 1500, just before 1500.
I have a question on that.
Fantastic answer. Go ahead, Amy.
My question is, okay, I understand at least it's conceivable that Christopher Columbus wasn't anywhere near his real name. So
Yeah.
if that is true, why do we have this Christopher Columbus, aside from the fact that it's got the CC, which is year 33?
Well, I speculated in one video that the legend of Saint Columba or other Irish saints have combined with this legend. And that could only be if there were pre-existing stories of transatlantic contact, which were only known in certain countries or certain regions. So, like, have you noticed, like, I don't know if you travel much, but if you go to a different country, they give you a whole new nationalistic basis, their version of a story that you never hear in another country. So I am wondering if one of these stories of early transatlantic contact before books were printed combined with the Columbus story. And then in addition to all that, you have Simon Wiesenthal, who in the 70s wrote a book saying that he has discovered, and he was basically a private eye. He was a kind of detective. He was hunting down the Nazis. And with all this experience, what does he do? He comes up with a theory. And I've been unable to buy this book because it's either not available or it's like close to $100 because it's getting so rare. He comes up with a theory that Columbus was a Portuguese Jew, and his name wasn't even Columbus, it was something else. And he was born in a fishing family, and he decided to rescue Jews from Spanish persecution. And they decided, heck, we're going to go to America. And how does he know about America? Well, there must have been pre-existing knowledge. They must have already been there. And he's working. And the other thing is, the Columbus, however you define him, was working with bankers in Milan. No, not Milan, sorry, Genoa. And Genoa had, like England, had the Templar flag. So were they working for a secret Templar organization that was pumping gold out of South America? And did the Spanish actually take over this Templar empire? And they said, hey, we've got the gold now. Because throughout history, it's always one empire taking over the business of another. For example, you know that Great British Empire? That's actually the Dutch Empire. All those islands, they were all Dutch islands, and they just snatched it away. And the Dutch, where did they get it from? They snatched it from the Spanish and the Portuguese. You know?
Yeah.
So, what do you make of that?
I put up a video today. In fact, I mirrored a video on the Dutch relationship to things. It's more legal oriented than it is, history oriented per se, although it's sort of the history of legal things. So, yeah, the Dutch were involved in all of that, and yes, they kind of got usurped. And anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there.
The Dutch were super rich, super clever. Like in different cities in Holland, they have you can see the old VOC. That's the Dutch East India Company, and you can see all their riches and the wealth of the owners of this company and the traders, the people who went over to the Indies, to Indonesia, and they traded and they made so much money and all these custom weird mansions and houses they built, and you can see how rich they were. It was and they mastered the art of mechanical power before anyone else with their windmills, and they also controlled the Baltic trade. They got cheap timber, so that they could make a ship for maybe a quarter the cost of anyone else. So that they were just so smart, and yeah, they if you examine their history, they took over so much, and then the English simply, after the French wiped out the Dutch a little bit just before 50 years before Napoleon's era, they kind of put a stop to their golden age. After that, the English started finally building a bigger fleet, a stronger fleet, a better navy, and they said, hey, you know all this Dutch stuff, like Australia, for example, New Holland, or maybe America, New Amsterdam, New York. Hey, that's ours now. And they even cloned the idea of the Dutch company, the Dutch East India Company. They said, hey, now it's the British East India Company, and the British flag the East India Company flag is now is as you see, it's the American. It became the it wasn't the Union, it was the Union Jack or something, but it became the American flag because it had a Union Jack and stripes instead of stars and stripes. It had a Union Jack and stripes. That was a colonial flag in America. That was the British East India flag. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like this is yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. The Dutch were leftover Vikings.
Yes, and
So,
I actually
yeah,
go on.
so the Vikings, what did they do? They ran around and kicked the shit out of anybody they came across and took their stuff. And so they became wealthy by stealing everybody's shit.
Well, there's one interesting thing now that you mention that the stripes that you see, if you were to invert that and you ran that vertically, those lines, that's the old Viking sail, the American flag today.
Yeah.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Well, look at pictures of old Viking ships, and you'll see the vertical red and white stripes.
Vertical or horizontal?
Vertical. Oh, sorry, horizontal. The American flag. The American flag today is vertical. But if
Yeah.
you were to make those
No,
stripes horizontal,
no, they're horizontal.
Yeah, so look at old pictures of Viking ships, and that's what their sails look like.
Oh, I'll look that up.
Exactly right. And I got to tell you also, the Dutch or like the Viking ancestors, the very tall Frisians, who are possibly Atlanteans, they were just as ruthless as the Vikings. And there's another thing. If you look at the way the Dutch system is set up, it was never state-based. It was always entrepreneurial, capitalism, freedom, freedom to prosper if you work hard. They never had this huge state thing because they didn't want that. They wanted to get rich. And what does that remind you of?
Reminds me of Vikings.
And also, the
Yes.
US. These are the foundational beliefs of the American forefathers, who, in a way, must have learnt all this from the Dutch in New Amsterdam or wherever the Dutch colonies were in America. This was a sort of entrepreneurial. There's no king on top of me because I'm determined to make the money and to get the wealth. And this is a very Dutch thing. That's where that idea originated. It didn't originate in England or France, which were always about the king and the state and the glory of the nation. In Holland, the view was, well, what does any of that have to do with the price of fish that we're trading with China? What does that have to do with getting rich? And so that view of the Dutch and Gandalf also is, and Rufus, you're correct. That's a Viking view as well. It's like, hey, we're going to go over here. We're going to take that. That's our new colony, and that's exactly what the Dutch did. They were ruthless. Even if there was like they tried to conquer the Philippines from the Spanish. They said, look, there is a Spanish fortress there in Manila. But we're just going to try and take over. So they sent in some mercenaries and they tried to conquer the Philippines and add that to the East India Empire, but that was unsuccessful. But they tried everything and they made a huge empire.
Charles, I really want to ask you something, and this is in relation to the early Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire. You're familiar with how they mistook Cortez for their god Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl, yeah, that's it. And
Quetzalcoatl.
my Aztec's terrible, but
We'll never forgive you.
That's because you're Canadian. We forgive you.
well, from my general knowledge of the entire scenario that went down was when Cortez arrived with his men and they burnt their ships, go big or go home, right? They went inland, and when the early reports were coming into Tenochtitlan, what's modern day Mexico City, that there were these bearded white men coming inland. The Aztec were convinced that Cortez and his men were the return of their gods, and according to their ancient stories, these gods said that they would return at the exact point in history that that Cortez and his men arrived on the shores there, where Veracruz is today in Mexico. Like, there's something really strange about this entire story, and I really, before going any deeper into it, I'd like to know your opinion on that whole shebang.
Well, my take on that is there's so two possibilities that spring to mind. So if if they knew, either they knew when the Europeans would return, because the beards, they're from Europe, obviously. So either the Europeans told them when they would return, or their predictions based on all the returns, the previous returns, were lining up for another return at this time. And I don't know which one it is. And I don't know if anyone knows. I don't know if you know, so either say, I've speculated in a video, there was a Templar Empire in the New World, and people have been saying this since forever. The Templar flag on the Columbus ship, what's going on? Was he really a Templar? Was he even called Columbus? Is it all a big secret? So they told them when they would return. Or it's following a weather cycle. So every time civilization rises up again in Europe and they start to discover international shipping and these huge sea lanes on the trading, on the huge ocean currents, which push them along, push them straight to the, all you have to do is hop on the ocean current and it pushes you to the New World. It's just the flow of the water, not just the wind, the water is flowing as well. Did their Aztec mathematicians and priests and Mayan mathematicians actually say, hey, these guys keep coming back every 500 years or so? And I believe it might be something like that, because there is a sort of 500 to 1,000 year weather cycle, because you'll notice that, say, 1,000 years ago in Europe, there was an economic boom. In 1000 AD, the Vikings trashed everything in Europe. They went everywhere in Europe, trashed everything, and started these new countries, especially in Eastern Europe. So in Poland, the history starts in basically 1000 AD. It was started by basically Vikings coming in from the north. Same with Russia. And then suddenly, 500 years later, Dark Age, but 500 years later, it's warm again. It's warm now as it was during the Middle Ages. Some say warmer. Who really knows? But so suddenly civilization is back on its feet. And there's a huge neglected period, which my professor at uni was covering, known as the 12th century Renaissance. The 12th, and he was arguing that in the 12th century, it was just as Renaissance as the Renaissance was in Italy in the 1400s and 1500s. It was just as cultured. There was a boom of literature. Suddenly they got very wealthy and the temperatures were very warm. They say Greenland was 3 degrees warmer than it is today. And suddenly all those countries in Northern Europe acquired massive wealth. And their agriculture, they had no failed harvests. Their agriculture was booming, just like today. And they suddenly had this money to build these skyscrapers, these absolutely enormous cathedrals. And you look at the one in Cologne, they started building the one in Cologne. They said, we're going to finish it because we've got all this money. And then the weather must have changed. It apparently started raining a lot more in the time of Edward III, Longshanks, the late 1200s. And suddenly the money started to run out. And I can absolutely prove all this. I can prove all this because there is this cycle, because England in the 1100s, 1200s was powerful. They owned half of France. They could easily make war with Europe. They could send people on crusade. They had all this wealth. And then a few decades later, in the time of Longshanks, he's the guy in Braveheart who chucked the guy out,
Yep.
pushes the guy out the window,
Yep.
Who he doesn't like. He could barely control Scotland. But a few generations earlier, the Scotland king was, oh, yes, sir, anything you say, sir, I'm going to give you all that money, all that tribute, yes. Everything had shifted. And so there is this cycle, it's economic cycle. So maybe they're following that.
See, I know this is going to sound like maybe, of course, to most people, say a random person were to come across this and hear this, but I know this is going to sound a little out there, but I truly do believe that at one point in history, roughly around the time that Atlantis supposedly existed, there was some type of spanning civilization that existed all over, and when it fell, certain parts of its knowledge remained, and I believe that there's been some type of maybe underground elite that has maintained this knowledge going all the way back to the fall of Atlantis, and they had some type of record of their contact with the people in Mesoamerica, and they remembered and they had the knowledge that if they were to return at this exact point, they would have a massive edge in some kind of psychological warfare aspect in fighting against the Aztec Empire. And maybe this knowledge is why Cortez attacked the Aztec Empire when he did. I think that's probably really out there, but I don't know. It's the most logical reasoning I can come up with for it, why it all went down the way it did.
Yeah, well, that is, I guess, correct. And Cortez himself, he kind of almost they say he invented this myth. They call it a myth. They say it's the myth of the white gods, and he invented that as some kind of propaganda. And then you look at the motive for this so-called propaganda, and there isn't one. I'm sure he was telling the truth. And there are accounts that the Inca kings were actually white. They were Europeans. There are accounts that, and I made a video about the Templars in the New World, and I showed that the Tarascans, if you look, the Tarascan Empire is ignored by historians and archaeologists. The Tarascan Empire is slightly to the northwest of the Aztec Empire. The Tarascans had, they had a Tarascan race. They were sort of like the early Romans who had this Roman race, and the Tarascan race, they kept them segregated from the rest of the natives, and the Nahuatl or something, or whatever they're called. And if you look at what they look like Scotsmen. They're Europeans. They're wearing tartans. They're wearing green Highland caps. What's going on? There's obviously been some very recent contact just before Columbus, and a bunch of Scottish Templars are possibly ruling this empire in the New World. And the weird thing is, as soon as the Spanish met these guys, they made a peace treaty with them. They didn't try and conquer them. They actually they saw them as equals, and the Spanish made a peace treaty with them. But then after about 10 years after that, the Spanish said, "Hang on a sec, we're conquering these guys." They conquered them as well. But you're exactly right. The kings and the ruling class in the Americas were European looking, and that is, I think, the exact reason why suddenly, these are their relatives. They're more royals coming over. So who do we worship? Do we continue to worship our existing rulers who are oppressing us and who look like the new gods? Or do we turn to the new gods who look exactly the same as these guys anyway and worship them instead? Because maybe we'll have some hope with them. So I think that's also a reason why that Cortez was able to take over with 60 guys, because he was already basically a royalty, right? What do you think?
That's a great point. I've been dying to cut in here. Didn't want to interrupt Gandalf or your flow, but are you familiar with the cargo cults?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, to me, what it sounds like you've been describing as cargo cults. As you know, and I'll say it just for the audience, this is sub-Saharan Africa. This is remote areas of Australia, remote jungle areas of South America, where modern humans would fly in with airplanes, like little Cessna airplanes would fly in, and they would set up a camp for whatever purpose, whether it be research or whatever they were exploring for minerals, whatever they were doing, and they would come back periodically, and then they would leave sometimes for weeks or months at a time or years, and then these extremely primitive tribes would literally worship these white men who had this amazing, magic-like technology, right? Was it Arthur C. Clarke? Any sufficient technology would seem like magic to a primitive culture. So,
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
thank you. So these cargo cults would pop up, and these primitive tribes would, they would create little airplane trinkets, and they would pray to the airplane god or whatever, and then every once in a while the white men would show up with an airplane full of supplies, and there would be chocolates and candies and cool stuff that they would hand out, and little cults, like whole religions and whole cults would spring up around this whole prospect. So when you're talking about Cortez returning to South America, this is what came to my mind is cargo cults.
You're exactly right. Gods arriving on ships, because whoever was ruling the Americas at the time that Cortez arrived, I think there were probably still some long skull rulers who were from the Black Sea, living and ruling the Incas. And the whole basis of their power was the myth that they once arrived, that they had arrived in the Americas on the ships with the beards, with the paraphernalia, with the high technology and the metalworking as well. The Americas did not have metalworking before the Olmecs, I think, arrived from China, and before whoever these people arrived from Eurasia, coming from across the Atlantic. The Tarascan Empire as well, they were the king of metalwork in the New World. And as I said, they look like Scottish Templars. But on your point, the whole basis of the whole reason they were able to rule was the myth they created around themselves. We're the guys who came on the boats, cargo cult.
Now, are the Tarascans, are they the ones that built the pyramid complex near Mexico City that has the Pyramid of the Sun?
Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan.
Apparently, Teotihuacan were they were known as the Toltecs. Some people said they were the Toltecs. The natives said that, and the Toltecs had a very beautiful, very intricate kind of almost technical computer-looking, like it looks like a computer art or something that they carved into their totem poles, and also the Toltec statues. They look like the Tiwanaku statues, which also look like ancestors of the Easter Island statues. But historians don't always call them Toltecs because they're not sure who built the Teotihuacan civilization. They just call it Teotihuacan civilization. And when Europeans arrived there and looked at those buried mounds, they asked the natives there who built them, and they either said they were Toltecs or we don't know, because it was so long ago. You know, it's the time of Christ. Maybe the Romans had something to do with it.
You know, I've actually been to Teotihuacan, and they had hot and cold running water. They had flush toilets. They had they had an empire that was as well put together as the Romans. And the complex in Guatemala, around Palenque, if I'm not mistaken, I think they've only uncovered 5%, maybe 10%, maybe. And topographical LiDAR imagery shows that there's like 95% still uncovered. And we had private tours when we went and visited, and our tour guide would point to a hill or a mountain that was covered in trees, and he said that's a pyramid. And
Wow.
he said, yeah, we just, we can't get to it. There's just too much to uncover. And this was a civilization that was 2, 3 or more million people strong.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
what's fascinating about, like, you bring up a good point, is there are these mound structures covered in trees all over North America. If you look, like, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Cahokia, right? And that was that in, I think it's St. Louis, what they used to call Mound City, just because there were so many of these mounds, and they were all vacated and depopulated. I think it was in the mid 1500s is when the massive die-off took place of the Native American populations around the Mississippi. After Hernan de Soto went through the southern coast there of the U.S., he went along from Florida through Alabama, Georgia, and into Mississippi, and then died in Louisiana today. And the contact with the Native Americans led to this massive die-off, and that's why all these ruins exist there around the Mississippi.
So true, so true. Those mounds are everywhere. By the way, on another point, on that, I don't want to change the subject, but on the Roman point, Rufus saying it's like the Roman Empire in that area, and maybe Cahokia was an offshoot of the Teotihuacan civilization because they were so similar from that time. But it strikes me that the Teotihuacan, the whole Viracocha thing, is very Viking/Roman. And what I wanted to tell you was, if you look up a picture of Viracocha himself, he looks like a Roman, the staff god. He's got 2 staffs. He looks like a Roman centurion. And the Roman centurion himself carried a staff. He carried like a stick like a gnarled sort of stick. That was his symbol of authority, and also a kind of spear. And if you look at Viracocha, that's what Viracocha is carrying. If you just Google pictures of Viracocha, he looks like he's got a red cape, like a Roman. He's got the feathered headdress. He's got these two sticks. It looks like a Roman centurion. And so there must have been some Roman trade, and the Romans must have been very cautious, saying that the Romans must, you know what? I'm thinking the Romans must have had contact with America, because the Romans inherited the Etruscan Empire, which was trading the orichalcum, and they must have got the knowledge of America. They must have had gold mines in America. And that explains why the Romans were so damn rich and powerful in the first century, because after the first century, they must have lost this trade because they just go downhill and they lose all their money and they're struggling. They're always struggling against the barbarians. But in the first century, about the time of Teotihuacan and all this, the Romans were so rich that it was no struggle. They walked all over the Germans. They walked over everyone they chose. They had unlimited resources. And later on they had no resources. They were always, oh, the barbarians are coming, hide behind the walls. Quick, build a wall, hide.
Well, that's what, man, like that's always like blown me away, is how there was the Cimbrian War where these Germans came down and Marius had to fight them and defeat them, and the Romans, they could take these huge losses and then they could still go back and defeat these giant barbarian armies in the hundreds of thousands. And then a few centuries later, when the Vandals and the Visigoths started coming into the Roman Empire, they capitulated and they just started ceding giant swaths of land to these different barbarian tribes like the Burgundians and the Franks, you name it, right? But a few centuries earlier, the Romans, if it was like Caesar or Marius's time or Sulla's time, they would have annihilated these barbarian invasions. And you'd think 400 years they would become more and more sophisticated, but all reports show that the Roman army was really like a shadow of its former self. There wasn't even the cohesiveness of the early legions. It was kind of, okay, there's 1,000 guys there and 1,000 guys here. Let's just run across the field and start hacking and slashing. There was no formations. There were no cohorts, fighting in that typical Roman line formation that they used to have. It just completely evaporated by the time of the Vandal and different barbarian invasion period.
You're so right. I mean, in the Republican and the Roman, the early Roman times, their military philosophy was, we will march as quickly as possible to get to the enemy and destroy them. And in the late empire, it was the opposite. It was, oh, okay, we think the enemy's over there. We're going to bide our time and choose a location to have a good battle. And this is what medieval kings did when medieval kings always did this because they were all sort of equally matched, kind of poor, didn't have that much money. We have to protect what we've got. Romans of the first century were like, we know we're going to destroy them. Let's just go and get them. And that's why actually they were ambushed a couple times doing that, weren't they, during the Gallic Wars in Germany as well. They're like, we know we're going to kill them. They're nothing. And because they had all this money and resources and wealth. The other thing I've got to say, just before Rufus brings up the centurion here, they can tell the level of trade, the level of economic power based on the number of shipwrecks. And the most shipwrecks are in the first century. And after that, there is a rapid decline of shipwrecks. So it's showing that there must have been lots of pirates in the Mediterranean, which the Romans were unable to control because suddenly they hardly have any trade at all by the end of the empire. And even in Roman Britain, at the end of Roman Britain, they stopped making coins. There's no coins for a few hundred years in Britain. That's how bad it was. There was no economy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fast. Well, just before we go off the barbarian subject, just the battle of what was the name of that battle that took place? I think it was not. I forget the exact name, but it was the battle that took place between the Romans. I think there was 2 legions, and there was something like 300 to 200,000 soldiers who decided to fight for Queen Boudica, and the 10,000 Romans lined themselves up between 2 hills, and they destroyed 200,000 British soldiers that were fighting for Queen Boudica. Like the tale of how that battle went down, that was one of the most gruesome stories I think in all of ancient history.
Yeah, you're so correct. I mean, it's like I don't know the name of that battle, but the Romans excelled because in that part of the world, everyone was fighting with heavy. It was city states, and they were all quite wealthy, and they all had used heavy infantry. And many of these barbarian tribes, they didn't use heavy; they just had light infantry with just not much armor or no armor. And so the Romans just were behind their shields and able to do all this. And the Romans also built walls around themselves in the field. They built walls around themselves, around the enemies they were besieging. They built walls behind them to stop counterattacks. They were just building while they were fighting, and they had all this money to do this. And no one else had the economic resources they had. Yeah, it's incredible.
You know, the more I look at these images of Viracocha, and you know, this it's interesting because this image just pops up right here. I was going to say this a little while ago. This gigantic reed boat. Look at the size of this reed boat. And I was going to say that reed boats were able to literally cross the entire Atlantic Ocean back in the day. I mean, these reed boats were the real deal. These people knew how to. That's pretty amazing. That's wild.
Oh
I
yeah, look
I
up the Konkiki expedition.
Yeah, I
For
was going to say I read a book by Thor Heyerdahl. I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but it's about building a Sumerian reed boat and sailing all over the universe with it. It was pretty amazing, and he made it very clear that such ships would be quite easy to accomplish back in the day. They could have easily done sailing everywhere.
That book is amazing because he actually goes to visit the Sumerians,
Yes, he does.
who are now the Marsh Arabs, and these people still have red hair. Like for example, one of Saddam's generals, you might remember, he was a redhead with like blue eyes, and he was an Iraqi, a native Iraqi, basically, and. And he visits these guys, and they say you have to cut the reeds after October or after September, and then the
Yeah,
ship will sink.
right. There was a specific time frame that they had to acquire the reeds during. Otherwise,
They get waterlogged.
they yeah, they get waterlogged and sink, and then he wouldn't have a boat anymore. And sure enough, he took them at their word, built the boat with the reeds cut at the time they said to, and he was floating along for quite a while.
Well, the more I look at these images of Viracocha, the more I'm starting to think to myself, this might be a representation of the planet, or otherwise, according to Velikovsky, the comet Venus. Because, I mean, just look at this one here, this famous painting here. He's got the feathers in his hat. He's got a staff. At the tip of the staff is a star. His earrings are a spiral. And the Viracocha image, I don't know, I'll go ahead and get into my little presentation here in just a second to sort of help solidify what I'm thinking here. But this Viracocha character, if you look at his face, look at what's coming out of his head. All these little tendrils or bulbous things all the way around his entire head.
Yeah, rays.
Snakes, like Apollo, Medusa.
Okay, see, you said it, Medusa. I didn't say it, you said it. Because
Yeah,
Medusa is identified as the planet Venus. Medusa is another version. It's the Venus, like Kali, the goddess Kali, which is also the planet Venus. She has beautiful and also terrible aspects. Like the goddess of the sea. Sometimes the goddess of the sea is good to you, and sometimes she's a bitch. So this concept of the good and the beautiful, and look at this, Viracocha here depicted as a dragon. That to me is a dead giveaway. because anything associated with the dragon, the feather dragon, the hairy dragon, the serpent dragon, the winged serpent, the fiery dragon, um, this is the planet Venus. And give me just a couple of seconds to just filter through these images. Um, and Viracocha here is depicted as the warrior god. He's got these two weapons in his hands.
Two rods of some sort, yes.
And he's always depicted inside, circled. His face is always circled. So you just wait. Let me get into this little presentation. I'll show you what I want to talk about regarding the planet Venus. And Charles, one of your assessments in one of your videos that maybe I'm only speculating, but maybe I can add some light, or perhaps, dare I say, correct you on. Um, let me just go ahead and do this. Let me open up this other folder here. Give me 5 seconds. I'm going to move you out of the way. Open.
I'll take a break.
Yeah, you want to go hit the restroom and come back in a few seconds? I'll tell you what, everybody, you guys, Amy and Gandalf, you guys want to chat amongst yourselves or talk to the live stream, and I'll be back. I'm going to go ahead and go use the restroom as well. I'll be back in a few seconds.
Okay.
All right.
I tell you, this astrotheology stuff has me quite fascinated. I'm seriously looking forward to what Aaron's going to put up to discuss what we're seeing, I presume.
Well, the whole thing is, you know, I think people would have to be really ignorant to assume that a lot of the symbology in our modern world isn't based off of the stars and planets and all that, you know. The planets are named after gods. There has to be some ancient connection going back tens of thousands of years.
Oh yeah, I am certain that whatever history we have is nothing like what really happened. That's just basically what I've got worked out. There's just too much that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you know, I think that the greatest trick the people that are running society today is, you know, being able to fool people that there isn't this ancient history going back tens of thousands of years before, when they say that there was sophisticated civilizations and cultures. You know, the greatest trick they ever pulled was hoodwinking people into thinking that the first culture and civilization was Sumeria in Egypt.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, one thing that gets to me about the history is, you know, I think about the Reformation, and it's like, why would they quote copy works and then destroy the originals? That makes no sense to me unless they were miswriting history.
Well, how many rewrites have happened to the Bible over the past 2,000 years?
Oh, well, yeah, but at least in those cases, the originals are, or at least close to the originals, or much closer to the originals, uh, are available. But there were books that they, you know, the Jesuits just, oh, we're just copying them, and
Well,
but we're
what,
going to destroy the original.
well,
Does that make sense?
what's really fascinating is that there is some acknowledgement of the sophistication of the old early civilizations. Like when it comes to Egypt, it said that the old priest class used to be able to put on picture shows and shine them upon like a wall. And the way it's described and the way it's explained how it was done was basically they were playing projectors or for the people. So they would bring in the people out off the street, and they would put on early motion pictures for these people that are wanting to know the knowledge and power of the priest class of Egypt. So it is acknowledged, and at least some of this stuff is acknowledged that, yeah, well, the Egyptians 4.5, 5,000 years ago did have projectors that they used to play movies on walls for the different people of the different cities to show their knowledge and their power and their closeness to the Egyptian gods. So at
Right.
least there is some of this acknowledgement that there is some kind of secret underground knowledge base that's existed for thousands of years. And we
Yes.
have Charles back with us.
Charles, are you back?
I am indeed back.
Okay. This is an image. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So this is an image. I took a screen grab from your video yesterday, and you speculated that this might have been a tool of some kind, like a blender or perhaps a power generating tool, like a windmill of some kind. What was it that was in your head on this? And you were asking your audience, opinions on what they thought it was. This is in Egypt, right?
Yes. I was of the mind that Egypt needed a huge amount of mechanical power to do what they did. If, as has been demonstrated, and this is controversial, that many of the rocks are geopolymer rocks, then that means they had to have some kind of crushing machines, some kind of machines for moving blocks. If you look at the Arab legends of how the pyramids were built, the Arab legends say the block was on a magic carpet. A guy tapped it with a stick and it moved along a sort of conveyor. So we're talking mechanical power. So what drove this? There must have been a mechanical power network. So I look at these and I don't see flowers. Some people say they look like the 5-pointed stars because they do have a fifth point, but that's not true because then the points would be equidistant, and they're not. They look like stem.
Right.
Like there's a rotary mechanism in there. To me, they look like wind turbines.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when I first saw them. I said, if you take what we've got going today all over everywhere and just add another blade, why, there you go. Because
Well,
the ones that we see have 3 blades.
I'll admit that they do look like wind turbines.
Yeah, that looks like a big wind turbine power generator.
However, I'm going to suggest a completely different hypothesis. I'm going to suggest that that is a representation of the planet or comet known as Venus.
Go
And,
on.
and I'm going to show you why. Because when people carve things in stone, it's usually of great importance. It's not like they would carve, their common machinery in stone. The things that they went to the trouble to carve in stone were things of extreme importance. The comet Venus, according to Velikovsky, according to Thunderbolt's project, David Talbot, and Anthony Peratt, Donald Scott, and Wal Thornhill, they have investigated Velikovsky's assertions that that Venus was known to the ancient people as a comet, that it was a newcomer to the solar system, and it was known as a comet, and it was both beautiful and terrible, and that's why we have the ancient myths and stories of the maiden and the witch, because the comet Venus had both attributes. Sometimes she was beautiful, and sometimes she was terrible. In other words, she would bring wrath upon the earth. And here's what I mean by this. And let me see if I can go to the beginning. That is known as the cosmic pillar. I'll open this up again, and I'll keep it open for comparison. This is the cosmic pillar holding the cosmic star. So the up and down, hopefully you can see my mouse moving around here on the left side. This is the cosmic pillar, and this four-pointed star is Venus. And here's why I think this. Because all around the world, these images, this is a Rosicrucian cross. And you have the 4 points, and you have the cosmic pillar. And all around the world, Christian, Egyptian, this is the cosmic pillar holding aloft the cosmic wheel, the cosmic star. And these images are all around the bloody world. Mesopotamia and California. I mean, California and Mesopotamia, we pretty much have the whole world covered right there. These are images of the cosmic pillar holding aloft. This is the Crow Nation. This is the, Native American. And what do you see on the inside? You see the four-pointed star. Notice there's a red gem or a red square on the inside. Keep that in mind, the red. And keep in mind the yellow background. Keep that in mind as I go forward. And then, of course, the cosmic pillar or mountain. Sometimes it's recognized as a mountain. Mexico, the cosmic wheel. Another one from Mexico, cosmic wheel. Mesopotamia, by the way, that's recognized as Shamash. Troy, Mycenae. This is Mayan, and you'll notice the one in the middle is an X. It's not necessarily the up and down vertical horizontal cross. The one in the middle is an X. Native American, again, the one in the bottom middle is an X. So it really depends on where you are, your location on Earth, and the time period for which you're witnessing this cosmic event. Because this cosmic event, it morphed, it changed, and it became different things as time went on, as the planet Venus moved from its location to its current orbit around the sun. So there was a lot of morphology going on. And the people around the world, everyone around the world saw this and witnessed it, and it was extremely important because it meant catastrophe. These are Greek. Cosmic wheels, wheels within wheels, concentric circles. This is what reminds me of Ezekiel's wheel. Wheels within wheels, as Ezekiel describes. These are Roman renditions of the same thing. The cosmic wheel. The star. Which, by the way, if you look at this one right here, that's exactly the same thing that Viracocha on the tip of his staff was holding. It's exactly the same type of star. The Southwest United States. And in fact, this right here is my avatar. I've been there. This is Newspaper Rock, Utah. This is my current avatar right now. The Cosmic Wheel. Sweden. Cosmic wheel with the cross, concentric circles.
I don't know. I don't want to say something.
This,
Go for it.
I don't think I should say this.
you want? Go ahead, Gandalf. Derail me. Go ahead.
Go back to your picture of your icon. What we have here is a man riding a horse, and he's shooting an arrow at a deer. Now the thing is horses did not exist in the Americas until the Spanish lost all their stallions back after they lost Santa Fe to when there was the uprising in Santa Fe. I think that was in the late 1500s. Now it's possible the image that you're seeing there, that's a wheel, that could actually simply be a wheel, maybe of a cart that the Spanish used to ride around with.
Fair enough. I'll give you that. Fair enough. That's a good point and a good criticism.
I shouldn't have said it. I
You,
shouldn't have
you
said it
son
because
of a bitch. No, you're fine. These, no, you're okay. It's fine. No, seriously, that was a good criticism,
I agree.
all right, thank
That was
you.
a good comment, a good thing to point out.
asshole.
I'll never live it down.
You just took the air right out of my bubble. No, seriously, Gandalf, that was a good point. Okay, so these are a different set of symbols, but seen all around the world: Armenia, Brazil, California, New Mexico, all over the Southwest, America, Australia, Utah, and these symbols of the squiggle, the cosmic, sine wave or squiggle, and there's this whole other set. I'm sorry for the low resolution, but again, just the point is that these symbols are found all over the world. So people all over the world were witnessing some stuff. They were witnessing the same thing. These symbols meant something important to people all over the entire world. This particular group of symbols here is what's known as a Peratt instability. And over here on the left-hand side, where my mouse is, this big black over here on the left, this is known as a Peratt instability. This is an image of a plasma experiment, a laboratory experiment with plasma. This is sort of the behavior that you can get with various electrical experiments in a laboratory with plasma. So in other words, Anthony Peratt made the correlation because he's a plasma physicist and he traveled the world and he noticed that these symbols that were seen all around the world were disturbingly similar. I mean, why would people in Europe and Arizona and California, Africa, literally Italy, all over the world, why would they be painting and carving in stone petroglyphs the exact same symbol? And on the left-hand side is a plasma discharge experiment. Let me reduce and then shift. This is known as the squatting man. This symbol, if I'm not mistaken, this petroglyph symbol, the squatting man with the two circles, pay attention to the two circles under the arms. That's the significant part. This symbol, if I'm not mistaken, is seen in 130 countries around the world.
Yeah, there's no coincidence. It's not a
Yeah,
coincidence.
it's seen everywhere.
And on the left-hand side, these are plasma experiments. The cup, the chalice, the symbol, and you notice on the left, on the bottom left, it almost looks like a penis or something dangling between the legs, right? So you've got a man with a head and his arms are up and the two dots under his arms and his legs are spread out and he looks like he's got something dangling between his legs. I mean, look at these images. They all have something dangling between their legs. Okay? This is a plasma discharge. This is a stable plasma discharge laboratory experiment. So when you look at this from two dimensions, because this is a three-dimensional plasma discharge, those are literally balls, round, the thing in the middle with the two dots, that's actually a donut, but when you look at it sideways on from two dimensions, it looks like two circles under the arms, and so that's why people on Earth, they saw something in the sky that looked like this, and they all the way around the world decided that they're going to carve it into stone, they're going to scratch it into the rock in petroglyphs. This is a symbol, like I said, I'm pretty sure 130 countries this symbol of the squatting man has been found. This is a nebula. So the Thunderbolts project, the Electric Universe people, their thesis is that electricity, not gravity, is the dominant force in the universe. It governs the formations of stars. It governs the location and formation of planets. This is a nebula, which is enormous. Nebulas are, they're way, 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 way bigger than a solar system. Look at the filamentary structure and look at how it has a twist. This is typical of electrical behavior. Electricity wants to twist around itself like water. You ever turn on your tap water and have you ever noticed the water as it comes out, it twists, it spirals as it flows.
Yes, it does.
Electricity behaves like water. It wants to wind around itself. It seems to be the most natural way for it to travel. This is an image of the Cygnus Loop Nebula, and look at that structure. That is a twisted filament, no question. This is one of those, we've all played with these. If you haven't, you've at least seen them. This is a little miniature Tesla coil, plasma ball. They're toys. You can buy them at Spencer Gifts. Many people have had them. I got one. We've all seen them, played with them. But
Oh, yeah.
and this is a low resolution image, but if you ever get a chance, if you look very, very closely at the individual filaments coming off of one of these, there's actually two filaments and they spiral around each other. Okay, so that's a really, really interesting phenomenon that happens. And again, it's a natural phenomenon for electricity, just like water, to twist and spin and spiral around itself. This is it's a artist rendition of what electricity does. It wants to spiral around itself. This is known as a Birkeland current, named for the electrical pioneer Christian Birkeland. This is an image of the famous Venus de Milo. I want you to notice particularly her hair. It's not only red hair, but look at how it's long, flowing, fiery, filamental. Okay? This is a key element because Venus was a comet. According to Velikovsky, according to ancient art, ancient mythology, and by the way, if you pay very close attention, it's again when I zoom way in, the resolution is terrible, but there's a cloth, there's like a big drapery or something to the right of her, and if you'll notice, these are stars on this drapery, which is a clue that this is something that happens in the sky. Okay, so Venus, although depicted here as, an attractive woman in a clamshell with long flowing red hair, long flowing fiery red hair, keep that in mind. This is an image from Greece. This is a typical image of the comet Venus because what you're going to see is a recurring theme of a feathered, fiery, bearded, hairy, serpent-like thing that has tendrils, and you see his legs become two tails of snakes. They're twins, and sometimes they spiral around each other. Okay, the next one here, this image from Honduras, where the dragon spirals around another dragon. Okay, this is what people saw in the sky, again with the concentric circles. Not to mention that in Greek, comet, we call it, has a coma. Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, in Greek language, the word coma means hair, means long hair, and it's where we get the word comb, to comb your hair. So the whole concept of a coma and a comet and hair, it's all interlaced, the whole thing. Here, Mexico, the dragon, the serpent, the feathered dragon, again, they're intertwined. Egypt, same thing. This is an image of an electrical discharge, which looks an awful lot like feathers or disheveled hair. Here's another. Electrical discharge, looks like feathers, looks like disheveled hair. These are plasma discharges, electrical discharges. This is the nature of the universe. People saw this stuff in the sky. And this is where we get the mythology of the dragon, the feathered serpent, the bearded dragon, the feathered dragon, the hairy dragon, the fiery dragon. This is an electrical discharge in a laboratory. What does that look like? That looks like disheveled hair. This is the comet Hale-Bopp. This is a close-up, high-resolution image of the comet Hale-Bopp. And what does that look like? Disheveled hair. Filaments. This is an electrical phenomenon, by the way. The stellar nursery. Again, you can see the filamentary nature of the gas and dust of the stellar nursery. Now, gas and dust do not behave like this in a vacuum. They do behave like this under electromagnetic forces. Electricity. You don't get electromagnetism without the movement of electrons and electricity. Come on, shrink out. Let's go. Come on, keep it going. This is an artist rendition from the Thunderbolts project, based on Emanuel Velikovsky's work and based on petroglyphs and hieroglyphs in ancient mythology. This is what they think was going on. This is what they think human beings were witnessing. They think that the yellow behind, you remember the image I showed of the Native American, and I'll pull it up and do a side by side. Where did it go? Where was it? Where did you go, you little sucker? The Native American, what did I do with it? It's similar to a dream catcher, and I've got some images of dream catchers that I'll show you. Gosh, where did that thing go? I thought it was right here. I swear I thought it was right here in this folder. Am I just scanning too quickly? Where did it go? Anyway, alright. Maybe I'll find it later. So it had a yellow background, if you remember from earlier, just 5 minutes ago. The Native American Dreamcatcher thing. And it had in their version, it had a blue star, and it had a red square in the middle, which actually represents the planet Mars. So what you're looking at here is Saturn, which is the yellow behind. The white, which is the star, is Venus. And the red in the center is Mars. So there was an alignment. It was very close to Earth. And Mars would oscillate back and forth between Earth. And when Mars got close enough to Earth, the gravity of Earth would start to pull dust and atmosphere, and then eventually gravel and rocks from Mars. And that's why it looks like this. It's the cosmic column, just like this image right here of the Rosicrucian. That's exactly that image right there. So please interrupt me at any time if you want.
Well, it's the pillar, isn't it? You know, the pillar in the Bible that Moses followed?
No. Moses followed, it was a column of smoke by day and a pillar of fire by night. That's a volcano. That is a volcano. Pillar of fire by night, column of smoke by day. And if I'm not mistaken, that sounds a lot like a volcano. So I think Moses, the story of Moses was It was about a volcano.
It could be the Minoan.
So Mars, according to mythology, would oscillate back and forth. It would come close to Earth and then it would move back in its place, back up to this position, and it would move back and forth. And when it got close to Earth, it would rain this red material down on Earth, which is where we get the mythology of the the rivers of blood, and the land was covered in blood. I mean, there's a whole line of mythology around the world, not just the Bible, but all around the world. This mythology of everything was blood. The rivers were blood. The lakes were blood. The land was covered in red. Everything was covered in blood. So then eventually this alignment broke up, and then the planets reorganized themselves into the solar system that we now have today. So this is the story, according to Velikovsky, based on his research of ancient mythology and pictographs and petroglyphs. Go ahead, Amy.
I might point out that there seems to be a fair amount of evidence that the Earth was in a magnetically held setup with Saturn at the North Pole while we rotated with the North pointing towards Saturn.
That's correct.
And that the sun interloped.
That's
We
correct.
kind of came into the solar area and everything went wackadoodle at that point, and that was what caused that instability.
That's correct. And that was catastrophic for people on Earth.
Oh, yeah. I would say so.
I like it.
Yeah, so this alignment was on the North Pole. From our perspective, it was on the north. It was a polar alignment. And the ancient mythology of Kronos, which is Saturn, this is the yellow guy here. The ancient Greek mythology of Zeus, which is Jupiter, the son of Saturn, son of Kronos, and his brother Hades, overthrowing their father and taking over rulership. So now we have Jupiter, which is closer to Earth than Saturn is. So Saturn's a little further away now. And that makes sense if you look at it from the Greek the mythology of the Greeks. This is just to show how ubiquitous these symbols are. California, prehistoric rock art. And now look at this next one here. Oops, that's the column. That's the cosmic pillar, the cosmic mountain holding up the cosmic star, the cosmic wheel. There's your image. Where did it go? Let me see if I can find this. I'll try to open them up together. This other image, this is California, and this is Celtic rock art here. Celtic. California. Celtic. California. I mean, do I need to say any more that somebody around the world was seeing the same shit? This was the most important thing to human beings, is the stuff that was happening in the sky. Because it meant fire and brimstone. It meant, are we going to have a good year and have crops and feed ourselves? Or are we going to have a famine year? Or are the gods going to get angry and hurl lightning bolts and rocks, fiery brimstone, and, fuck shit up? Are they going to destroy shit? So the stuff that happened in the sky was of utmost importance. So again, this is the cosmic wheel, the cosmic pillar, the cosmic mountain. Just like that image that I showed right here. That's this. So this was the most important thing to people on Earth. And before I close this out, I'll finish off by saying that the comet is just an old artistic rendition of various comets and their attributes with long flowing fiery looking tails or hair. To the ancients, they didn't know what it was, they called it hair or beards. This is, oh, and by the way, I got to show you this. Um, this alignment here, let me open these two together. This alignment with Saturn in the background, Venus in front, and the white star pattern is a plasma discharge from Venus going to Saturn, and then Mars is in the center with the red and then the fiery tongue of Kali, or the cosmic pillar or the cosmic mountain. I found this by accident. This is my own discovery. Check this out, Charles. You're going to love this. This is right up your alley. This is an image, a very famous painting known as the Glorification of the Eucharist. And this is Jesus, the feet on the upper left, and this is God on the upper right. You may be familiar with this image. You can Google it. It's called the Glorification of the Eucharist. I won't try to pronounce this. Bonaventura Salimbeni, 1600. Look at this. Right below the feet of Jesus and God as they sit on their clouds. What does that look like? I mean, is that a dead giveaway? Is that a... I call that a confirmation. This is a Charles Cost confirmation right there. I'm convinced. What do you think, Charles?
Well, I had a very good presentation, by the way. I have a, and I'm a fan. I'm a fan of this stuff too. I don't really watch them on YouTube, but I've got one of their books. I got a couple points of praise, couple criticisms of the theory. I think it's a great theory. Points of praise, the Mars thing, the Mars oscillation. I've always thought that Mars is a twin of Mercury. It's in the wrong place because the planets seem to have evolved twinned up, like as you know, like Uranus and Neptune and Jupiter and Saturn, and then Earth and Venus are twins, but Mars fits better with Mercury than anything else that we see. And what's it doing out there? Maybe it's shifted. I think it's shifted. So I'm a fan of Velikovsky's idea of the planets flipping orbits and things, and that's like an electron would. I'm also a fan of this. This obviously there are electrical things popping up in ancient mythology. That's quite obvious. Very obvious, especially what you're showing now on the screen. That thing from China, the skull. It's literally a skull and crossbones from China. I always thought that evolved in Europe, but that is a skull, kind of skull and crossbones, but it's got flames coming out of it like a comet. So yes, yes.
These are more representations. They're just artistic, stylized, culturally stylized versions, and artistic renditions of the comet Venus. Because if you'll notice on the bottom here, these two images on both sides on the bottom, it's almost like a Doric column, or on the top of a pillar. And look over here, this is Hathor on the left.
Indeed.
So if I was to take this image and just rotate it upside down, now doesn't that look like Hathor's hair? And let's keep in mind that the middle images, these two guys in the middle, one from Mexico and one from the Han Mirror dynasty, these two images, they have the same attributes. They have extra arms. They look like spiraling, curling arms, almost identical. And that is indicative of the goddess Kali,
Mhm.
who is also identified as Venus. Here's Kali at her worst. Look at the disheveled hair. The tongue of Kali is the red image of Mars, the red material being extracted by a gravity sucked down to Earth as Mars approached Earth. Look at the fiery attributes on the circle. Always, Kali is always encircled. And look at her hair, the way it's spiked and fiery and flamed out. Here's another image of Kali. Now, Kali is known. Look, she's got all these arms, just like the arms of the plasma discharge that I showed you. Her hair is fiery again. She's encircled with flames. And look what she's holding. She's got a sword here, a hammer here. I'm not sure what this thing is, but this is a torch over here on the right side of the screen. And let me see, I'm going to check my notes here. Kali is known around the world, different cultures, as where did it go? Uh, the torch of the sky. This is the planet Venus, which is known as the torch of the sky because it was comet-like and it had a big fiery comet tail. The torch of the sky. It was also the long-haired star. It was also known as the dragon or the feathered serpent or the bearded star. The comet Venus in the Sumerian goddess was known as Inanna. The Babylonians had Ishtar. The Egyptians was Sekhmet. The Canaanite was Anat. The Hindu god Kali, which I'm showing here. The Greeks was Aphrodite, Athena, and Medusa, which you mentioned earlier, and countless others. She was beautiful and terrible. The dragon around the world also, always with the same attributes, was disheveled, hairy, feathered, bearded, fiery. Yet nothing in nature explains the dragon. There's no animal in nature that explains the dragon. Here's another image. Here's Kali again with the hammer, which makes a thunderous noise. The trident, which is an electrical device, electrical weapon, or um, and over here we have a torch, and I'm not. This hand looks like it's broken. I can't see what she's holding there. But again, with the fiery hair, always with the fiery hair, and the spiraling earrings. Again, with the same weaponry, a cup. In one hand, she's holding a cup. A torch, a hammer, a sword, a flame. This is Kali. This is the planet. This is planet or comet Venus. This is an old image of the princess. This is Venus with the flowing hair. Sometimes beautiful, and here's the witch. Sometimes old and disheveled with. And look at this. Let me just put these two side by side. Watch this. If I take that image and that image, let me just rotate this guy. Oops, too far. One more. This is electrical discharge in a laboratory.
I see a very distinct similarity.
So Venus was known around the world as a comet. Sometimes a witch, sometimes a dragon with her long disheveled hair and terrible attributes, because occasionally when the planets broke up, that was catastrophe for Earth. Fire and brimstone. I mean, shit happened. The climate changed. All kinds of catastrophic crops failed. It was a terrible time. And then sometimes as long as, things on Earth were going well, Venus was very beautiful. It was probably a marvelous thing to see in the sky. I mean, imagine looking up in the sky and seeing this. Imagine walking out on your porch and seeing this out your back window. That's gorgeous. That's amazing. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to show you. But anyway, where did it go? I'd be damned if I could. What happened to that thing? The Native American. Where did it go? Hope I didn't delete it. Hope I didn't exit out and delete it by accident. Um, what I do have are some images of dream catchers somewhere. Here where they are. This is a Native American dream catcher. It's just a symbol, and it's got the three feathers coming down here. Here's a dragon image from Persia. Again, this is a representation of Venus with her fiery, spirally, tendrily attributes as her comet tail spiraled and twisted on itself, looked like hair, beard, fire. And in Native America, we have these things called dream catchers. And very commonly, they have three feathers, sometimes more, sometimes, usually three, sometimes more. But this is another representation of the comet Venus. And this here, I'm not sure where did I get this? Is that from your video? I'm a little confused now.
Yes, it's something just prior to the Christian period in Egypt, from the Greek Egyptian period.
Okay, I think I did. I think I grabbed this from your video, and I didn't label it properly, so I apologies for that. I think, again, this is Venus, because if you'll notice the double loops at the bottom, it's got the column shape and strange head with no arms. Let me show you this. This is a petroglyph found in Arizona and I think in a couple of other places around the world. God, I got too many windows open right now. Where did the other one go? I'll close that one. Where did it go? I want this one. This one. Right there. I mean, is this pareidolia? Am I making a mountain out of a molehill? What do you think, Charles?
Well, there's a distinct similarity there. I mean, I would say, I would say you've got a pretty good case based on all this. I am not 100% convinced of all the arguments. And the reason is, although there's a strong similarity, the reason is I want to see it happening in the sky. And I know it changed positions, but I want that kind of evidence. But it's interesting that they replicate it like that in the lab. So I'm thinking, maybe it's based on ancient machinery kicking up this kind of display. Is that also a possibility? And so yeah, I want to see it happening in the sky, and then we can say, yes, they're right. They're absolutely right. You go on.
I was just going to say, I don't think we're going to be seeing it in the sky anytime soon again. The sun came in and tore everything to pieces, and now it's settled down.
there's another thing as well. So the comparison with the hair, that's a good comparison. But it also shows that hair full stop is a good comparison, possibly. And that the same laws which created us are visible everywhere. For example, with the Fibonacci ratio of the hand, it replicates that spiraling electrical energy. So with the hand, we see in the hand, we see the spiral of the fingers, and we see the spiral of DNA. And could it not be that if these indeed are plasmas, but the plasma being everywhere, being an electric universe, that then makes it hard to pinpoint what aspect of the electrical universe those pictures are referring to. What do you think?
I'm suffering from an extreme case of pareidolia. Because when I see stuff like this, right there, that image, and let me go back to the other. There's one in particular, this one right here. And also this one. So when I look at these, no, go away, no. When I look at images like this is an electrical discharge. And so is this. When I look at images like this, Charles, and then I look at image like this, which is a Native American dream catcher, or also known as a medicine wheel, I can't get away from my own cognitive bias. I'm suffering extreme pareidolia. I mean, is it just me?
I can surely see how you could be having pareidolia over this. And maybe it's not pareidolia.
You know, I see a kipu with a few feathers attached, but but yeah, I do believe in electric universe. It is absolutely the theory. Like you're spot on with that. It is the theory, and there isn't anything to compete with it. So and the fact the electric universe people are pushing the ancient myth of Velikovsky as well. I guess there is something to it, and so you're not imagining it. There is something to it. I just don't like how they say this must have been seen in the sky and all this, considering they're not backing it up with I want photographs of the sky. I want them to show the sprites in the upper atmosphere. I want them to show those resembling these. Otherwise, I feel it's still a little bit speculative, but they've got some great ideas for sure.
Well, far be it from you to worry about speculating.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You never speculate, do you?
This is why we love you, Charles, because you'll think outside the box. You're not boxed in by mainstream ideas.
Exactly.
Electric universe. I just want to see more. I want to see it in nature. And even what? How about even in outer space? Because if these phenomena can be created in the atmosphere, created by astronomical bodies coming together, surely our telescopes might be able to reveal some of this. And I don't know if they've gone into this, but they might be able to analyze images from the universe to actually show similar effects, even between double stars, or even between, say, they've even got pictures now of planets, extra solar planets far away in other solar systems next to stars. So that I don't know if they have that kind of resolution, but I'd love to see stuff like that. But yeah, the fact that it's an electric universe, I guess those are possible in the sky. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I would urge you to go spend some more time on the Thunderbolts Project YouTube channel and go check out some of their older presentations. They have a couple of I think they have 3 or 4 full-length, hour-and-a-half documentaries on their research and their findings. And we're talking about PhDs in plasma physics and electrical engineering physicists,